Okay, Councillor, you're on.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting of November 2nd at approximately 5 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Romana Beta,
Here.
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Present.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Here.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
Here.
and Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. The next item is approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes from staff?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, changes from the committee. Can I have a motion regarding the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
and Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Okay, the next item is approval of the consent agenda. Can I have items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda from the committee? Councilwoman Romero Worth.
I'd like to pull 7A.
Okay, any others? Councilwoman Romero Worth.
That's all for now.
Okay, Councilwoman Lindell.
Item I, please.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
A, B, and H, please.
Okay, A, B, and what was the other one?
H as in hat.
H as in hat.
Nope, I'm sorry, that is incorrect. G as in grape.
G as in grape. Okay,
Yes, not H.
H.
Sorry.
Okay, and just G on my agenda is approval of the capital reallocation 2018 GRT.
Yes, that's correct. Just for a quick
Okay,
question.
great. Okay. Councilwoman Villarreal, did you have any items?
I have none, except we will have to discuss the amendments for item 7A. So
Okay,
Thank you.
great. All right, can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended?
Move to approve as amended.
second.
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
and Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The consent agenda has been approved as amended. Item 5 is approval of the minutes, the first being the regular Finance Committee meeting of October 5th, 2020. Are there any changes from staff?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anything from the committee? Can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next are the Finance Committee meeting minutes of October 19th, 2020. Are there changes from staff?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Anything from the committee? Can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call?
Councillor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell. Was that a yes, Councillor?
Yes.
Oh. And
Thank you.
Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the minutes have been approved, so that brings us to the items that were pulled off of the consent calendar. The first is item A, which is consideration of bill number 2020-32, which is an ordinance amending section 14-6.2 SFCC 1987 to adopt by ordinance a maximum of 1,000 short-term rental permits in the city, to prospectively limit the number of short-term rental permits to 1 per natural person, to prospectively limit the proximity of short-term rental units, to require a local operator for short-term rental units, to adopt record keeping and reporting requirements for short-term rental unit owners and host platforms, and to clarify other provisions of the short-term rental ordinance, amending the land use code definitions in section 14-12.1 SFCC 1987 as they relate to short-term rental units, and amending section 12-2.3 SFCC 1987 to clarify that a short-term rental unit is not a group R1 occupancy for purposes of fire inspections. Okay, this item was pulled by Councilwoman Romero Worth, and I believe there are 4 separate amendments. I'll go ahead and before we hear the amendments, I'll go to Councilwoman Romero Worth and we'll start there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a member of the committee, I would like to move the adoption of this bill with the sponsor's amendment, which is one of 3 that are in the packet tonight.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second discussion.
And I, just for maybe the benefit of the committee, I'm happy to explain what the sponsor's amendment does, or if one of my co-sponsors wants to, or if you'd rather hear from the land use director on what the amendments do, or the city attorney's office. We've got a plethora of people who can speak to the amendment, I guess.
Okay, so you had mentioned 2 out of 3 amendments, but I believe there's 4 amendments, right?
Well, so in the sponsors amendments, there are 2 different provisions. So if, I'm just waiting for it to, oh, actually, there's more than, well, yeah, so there, I forgot, we are adding in the table of permitted uses, which is really just a technical change that the bill drafter noticed that we had not made. And then let's see, so that takes up on the amendment numbers 1 and 2. And then 3 on the sponsor's amendment would allow for, I'll just read it. Upon the death of the permit holder, the permit may be transferred to the permit holder's spouse or domestic partner if the spouse or domestic partner submits a written request to the land use director within 90 days after the permit holder's death. The spouse or domestic partner owns or will own the property upon the settlement of the permit holder's estate. So this was something that the Planning Commission brought up. It's a very limited ability to transfer a permit because generally speaking, these changes to the short-term rental rules would not allow the transferability of permits, but under this limited circumstance identified by the Planning Commission, the sponsors have agreed to allow for a permit to transfer between a domestic partnership or between couple, husband and wife. So, and then the 4th amendment would strike the buffer zone in the BCD. The provision, Eli, correct me if I'm wrong, provides that if you're within, the bill says if you're within 200 feet of the residential area that surrounds the BCD, you would not be able to have a short-term rental, and that 4th item on the sponsor's amendment gets rid of that provision. So the amendment does 3 different things, but it's all in one amendment.
Okay, and then there were amendments that were offered at the Public Works and Utilities Committee by members of the governing body that aren't members of the Finance Committee, but who have joined us this evening. The first having to do with the 7-day rental period, and I believe that amendment was offered by Councilman Garcia. And then the 4th was the short-term rental and the generation of gross receipts taxes and the designation of those gross receipts taxes towards affordable housing, and that was offered by Councilwoman Vihil Coppler. So my question for the committee, is specific to those two amendments. I would like to have a discussion regarding the gross receipts tax. Councilwoman Vihil Coppler, I had told her that I thought it was something that was germane to the Finance Committee and something we should consider. So I would like to take that opportunity this evening, and she has joined us so she can talk more about that. But I don't know how the committee feels regarding the 7-day rental period amendment and dealing with that this evening. Councilwoman Romero Worth, did you have any thoughts on that?
You know, if it's the pleasure of the committee, we can talk about it. I think somebody on the committee would have to make a motion in order for it to be adopted, or yeah, in order for it to be adopted. So, I mean, this is a little bit funky, this, you know, having amendments from members who are not committee members. I know certainly the GRT amendment is something that we might want to have a discussion on so that we can, as a finance committee, and with that lens, talk about the pros and cons of that particular idea.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious if, kind of to Councilor Romero Worth's point of individuals who are not on the committee, I would like to talk about both of these. And so do we talk about them and then just not vote on them at this point? I'm curious as to the process that we are really looking at right now.
Well, I think we definitely can talk about them, and then I think it's up to the committee if we want to take on one of them and support it, or not, or just pass it along. We had our discussion, and we'll let the other committees discuss it, and then ultimately the governing body. So I think it's up to the committee. So I guess when let me hear from the other committee members, and then I think I have an idea of how we can move forward. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no rule that you have to be a member of a committee in order to have a amendment be considered. And especially with the time frame that we're looking at, I think we need to at least discuss the ones that are put forth other than the ones that were by the sponsors of the ordinance. So I think the one that's germane to our conversation with finance is the GRT discussion. So I think that we should discuss that. So I guess I want to know process. How do we, if there's already a motion, how do we even discuss or consider the other amendments that are on our agenda or in the packet material?
And I'll refer to Councilwoman Romero Worth, but I think we can take up this first motion and discuss what those amendments are. And then could we then go to one of the other amendments? And then if there's a motion wanting to approve or deny that, or a motion regarding that one, we could go to that. And then the fourth one. So what I'm thinking, Councilwoman Romero Worth, is can we deal with these separately? First, the sponsors amendments, and then go to the other two. And if somebody wants to make a motion after hearing the discussion on them, then we can do that.
I guess I'd bring in the city attorney's office here. I think what we've done is what we do at the governing body meetings, which is we put a motion on the floor for discussion, and then we can have other amendments. But in this case, I think we should discuss, it sounds like the committee would like to discuss the other two that have been brought by non-committee members. And then I think we can discuss them, but then somebody on the committee would have to make a motion which would either vote them up or down. And that would be the finance committee's statement on those amendments, or we can just have a discussion. And if nobody wants to make a motion that's on the finance committee, then that's an option as well.
Ms. McSherry, does that sound correct? We can proceed that way?
Mr. Chair, And I think you're not held to a super rigid standard in the committee process, but I'm mostly here to help out on some of the legal questions on the amendments for STRs tonight. But I think that makes perfect sense. In order to make a recommendation, you will need a motion, but I think all the amendments are germane to the overall discussion of this legislation because I think they relate to the existing language. So probably discussion on the amendments is pretty relevant to the overall motion on the bill. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Villarreal, you still have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that if there's an amendment to be considered, that if it doesn't pass this committee, does that mean it doesn't move forward at all to the next committee?
I think it can be offered in the next committee. And it can be offered to governing body as well.
Okay, just checking, making sure that it doesn't disappear after this one potential vote on.
Yeah, no, I think if this committee wants to make a statement on those amendments, either voting them up or down, that would just be what the finance committee thinks. But certainly Public Works, Public Utilities has the ability to make their own statement, and then at governing body, the final determination would be made.
Okay, Councilwoman Lindell, did you want to add anything regarding the process?
No, I think that Councillor Romero Worth put forward a pretty good process for us to follow on this, and I'm completely satisfied with that. I mean, we can discuss these. We have a motion on the floor, but I'm fine to discuss the other amendments.
Okay, so let's go ahead and let's discuss the amendments that have been as part of the motion first, and then after that we will go to the other two amendments. So regarding Councilwoman Romero Worth's amendments, is there any questions or discussion regarding those amendments?
Yes, and Mr. Chair, just to be clear, that they're not my amendments, they're the amendments of the sponsors. So all four sponsors have agreed that these three changes, contained in this one amendment should be made to the bill. And as I already outlined, but happy to hear if there are questions about them or people need more information.
Okay, does the Finance Committee members have any questions regarding the amendments? Okay, then let's go to Councilman Garcia is with us. If you want, Councilman, to explain your proposed amendment, and then we could have the committee discuss your amendment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the committee for considering the review of this proposed amendment. I would have to say that I do disagree with some of the Finance Committee members' opinion in the matter that it doesn't necessarily affect the Finance Committee, that this amendment would ultimately lead to increased revenues for the city. So it absolutely impacts the finances for our city. So I appreciate our city attorney saying everything is germane, but I think this is very much in germane, given that should this amendment be approved, short-term rental operators will be able to rent out more than once a week, which will increase revenues for the city. So I put forth this recommendation. I know that it is not, has been part of our ordinance in the past, so it's nothing new. But this is moving forth on the recommendation of our Planning Commission. This is one of the recommendations that they made. I wanted to make this change prior to this coming back up for review when it was first reintroduced this summer. And I wholeheartedly believe that we need to do everything we can, especially in the economic situation we are currently in with our city, that we should not be limiting short-term rental operators to operate once per week. I've talked to a couple of short-term rental operators. They rent on average maybe twice a week, and during heightened season, it's very rare for them to operate 3 times a week. And so there's not much increase that would be seen in that sense. I think in the conversations we had in the public utilities meeting, there was comments made that by some of my colleagues on that committee that there would be increase in traffic, which would not necessarily be the case. Whereas if a person living at a house on their day-to-day, you're going to see that traffic, whether they're going to work every day, taking their kids to work every day, going to the grocery store every day. It's going to be a regular traffic that you're going to see. So I don't agree with that argument. And secondly, there was a comment made that the folks that were renting the short-term rentals tend to abuse the space and party, so to speak, which I do not believe is the case either. The vast majority of these renters do respect the neighborhoods. I had a conversation with one of our police officer members, and they do not see an overwhelming response to short-term rentals for disturbances. So that there is not a challenge in that aspect. With this proposed ordinance and the revisions to the penalty ordinance that was approved earlier this year, we have a structure in place to ensure that if a short-term rental is out of compliance and a disturbance to the neighborhood, we can take the appropriate measures to revoke that short-term rental operator's license. So I fully believe that this amendment is in the best interest of our community, and per the recommendation of the Planning Commission, we are moving forward with this. I'm moving forward with this proposed amendment. With that, I feel free to stand for any questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garcia. Any comments from the committee regarding this issue? Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. I think that there's no other issue that I've heard more about from neighborhoods than the amount of number of short-term rentals of places turning over and turning over. I appreciate Councillor Garcia's comments on this and opinions from people that I don't know the longevity of it or that it's really data-based. And the Planning Commission, I don't think the Planning Commission gets letters from constituents about the problems that they have in neighborhoods. I'm quite certain of it. I don't know that anybody thinks that it's a traffic issue, only a traffic issue in terms of not having neighbors, the comings and goings of different people. It's not about actual traffic of getting in the cars and driving here or driving there. I think that over the years, there's nothing that's been reflected to me more by neighborhoods than their annoyance of having constant turnover. It's not new in the ordinance, and certainly people that have short-term rentals, it was an opportunity for them to ask for that to be changed. It's nothing that any neighborhood association or any group of neighbors would come to us and say, I want to have more turnover of the short-term rental that's next door to me. I've had many, many constituent letters saying just the opposite, and that they would like enforcement of the 7-day rule. So as I've said before, this isn't something that I'll be supporting. And I think that over the course of time, listening to neighborhood associations is a reasonable thing. And not everything that we do is about making revenue for this city. We could make more revenue for this city in a lot of different ways. And that's not what the focus of this is for me. The focus of this for me is about maintaining neighbor relationships and neighborhoods. So that's what I have, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, anything else from the
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that?
Let me hear from the committee in case there's other questions or concerns, and then I'll give you a last word on that. Anything else from the committee regarding this specific issue? Okay, Councilman Garcia, I'll give you the last word on this, and then I want to get to the other amendment offered by Councilwoman Vigil-Koppler. So go ahead and if you want to give a final thought on this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. We have to remember the number one challenge that we're seeing with short-term rentals now is enforcement. That is our number one challenge we're seeing with them. And the second biggest challenge we're seeing is the sheer number of short-term rentals. And don't be distracted. It's not the number of folks that are renting it out per week, because I've had the same conversations with constituents, and the conversations lead to challenges of there's too many in my neighborhood, not that it's being rented out too much. I think with the addressing of the limiting the number of short-term rentals that can operate in a particular part of town, will address that. That's overwhelmingly what the community has asked for. And within my 1 year as a city councillor and just listening to community members that have been impacted by short-term rentals since I've lived in the city of Santa Fe, it's been surely the number of rentals, not the number of renting. So I would ask, don't be distracted. It's not the number of times being rented per week. It's not the type of people that rent it, because we have to understand that we're living in a changed society. We're living in a society where my generation does not prefer to go rent a hotel. I would rather go rent a short-term rental. And that's the way my generation operates. And we have to ensure that we are moving forward with the times, and we are addressing and working and changing and modifying as our society changes. And we are not limiting how our city grows and supports such businesses as short-term rentals, because ultimately it is a business endeavor. And we have to look at it as, is there any other business that we restrict business being conducted? Do we tell a restaurant, besides in times of a pandemic, you can only allow so many guests to dine at your restaurant? Do you tell a movie theater, besides capacity, we're only filling it up half this time? So we have to look at it in that sense. We're approaching this not from the business perspective, and we have to. This is ultimately a business endeavor that we're talking about. And I appreciate the time, Mr. Chair, and those are all the comments I have.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Garcia. Councilwoman Vigil-Koppler, can you explain to us your amendment? Thank you. Thank you both for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do just want to go over the purpose of my amendment, and then I have some comments on the other things that have been discussed. I don't know if you'd allow me to comment on that then.
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's, whichever you prefer to go over first is fine.
Okay, well, the purpose of this amendment is to capture a portion of gross receipts tax from rentals of short term, and to place those into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's essentially what this does. Now, in this has been prepared through the city attorney's office to put this into the appropriate place. So I was trying to find my place about exactly where this is being put into, but I think maybe the city attorney can comment on where exactly it goes, because I was trying to follow it page by page, but it's in a whole different section of a different ordinance with regard to municipal taxes. So, but essentially the purpose is to capture some of the gross receipts tax, and we can further determine what that is, whether it's a percentage or an amount. But at this time, this amendment is just to recognize that we should capture some of this because we can make a difference with our affordable housing program financially. Some of the comment early on, way back when we first started doing this was, and this was many months ago, from our public commentary and letters was that short-term rentals was somehow affecting affordable housing. And what we know is that majority of the short-term rentals are on the east side. And if those houses weren't used for short-term rentals and they were to be maybe placed on the market or rented otherwise, just like normal, there wouldn't be an impact for the affordable housing program because those houses, if they were sold, they would be out of reach of affordable. Rental prices, same thing. So doing this amendment gives us an opportunity to perhaps address some of those concerns, but also to give some kind of financial boost to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I'll stop there and see if there's any comment or questions.
Okay, great. Comments or questions from the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
I was trying to find my hand. It's too confusing sometimes. So I'm supportive of this concept. I don't know the ins and outs of the how it gets operationally, how it gets separated, but I know that we can, if we do this for other interests, we could certainly do it for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And, you know, I did bring this up, I don't know how long ago, to the attorney's office before we even started looking at amending the short-term rental ordinance and trying to find a way that there would be a portion of either the GRT or the lodger's tax to be utilized to go towards affordable housing initiatives. And I was told it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't legal, we weren't able to do it. So I'm happy to see that there's an avenue here to be able to utilize our GRT in order to support the Affordable Housing Trust. We don't have a regular funding source that's reliable. We have to rely on HUD funding, and that comes with its own challenges. And so if we can find a regular revenue source, I think it would be important to do so. So I'm supportive of this amendment. I just want to know maybe from staff how internally we make it happen, how, if we have to think of the percentage of GRT or if there's something that we have to define right now, or as it's written that we could utilize the language that the attorney's office came up with. So just wanted to hear maybe from attorney's office, or I don't know if it's finance that has to procedurally make this happen. And if we figured out those ins and outs, or we have time to figure that out, since this wouldn't take place until next fiscal year, next year. So overall, I think this is a great idea. I think short-term rentals weren't created so that people could create their only livelihood. It was supplemental income. And really, we should be thinking about how we can support long-term renting and long-term rentals and affordable housing in our city. So I'd like to hear from staff a little bit about the procedure of how this would work.
Okay, we'll start with legal, Ms. McSherry.
Chairman Abeyta, Councillor Villarreal. So the other section that Councillor Vihil-Coppler mentioned is section 18-10.4. So that's the part 4 of the amendment sheet, describes that section. So there's already a section in city code that allocates GRT between various categories. So the proposed amendment would take a portion of the unallocated GRT that currently goes directly to the general fund without a specific purpose assigned to it, And then we would, the part that is the unknown is the amount that it would be, because it would have to be estimated. The tax and revenue department at the state does not report to the city the actual amount from short-term rentals. So that part would have to be determined still. That's not specified here how the estimate would occur. But it's at least, it is permissible for that to happen. And then this would also, it doesn't carve out a section that's already been specified for a particular purpose, the way that this is drafted, but it would take away from the unspecified general fund revenues from short-term rentals.
Okay, and then as far as Councilwoman Villarreal's comment about going into effect next fiscal year, the ordinance would go into effect sooner, right? But is she correct that the collection or the designation of GRT couldn't happen until next fiscal year? Is that right?
Chairman Abeta, I think it would go into effect right away, but in terms of whether or not the estimate, we get these reports on a monthly basis from TRD in terms of our generated revenues. So I'm not sure I'm totally clear on the reasoning we think it would take a year.
Mr. Chairman, to that point, our FY21 budget and all of the revenues have already been allocated for FY21, and Ms. McSherry did outline the fact that the portion of unallocated GRT would be reduced if the allocation were to change for a portion to be transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So that would change our current year budget, thereby reducing our revenues for the currently approved FY21 budget. So our budget would be out of balance for the current year.
Okay, so if we
Mr.
did
Chair, on that point, I might recommend that if we don't want it to cause that problem, then you might want to put a later date into place for this portion of the bill. Because I think it would go into effect at the same time as all the other portions. So if you wanted to avoid that problem with the current year's budget, I would recommend delaying the initial date of applicability for this section.
But it does say beginning, item E does say beginning July 1st, 2021, which would start the next budget cycle.
Right. Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilwoman Vihil Coppler.
I want to further explain that Ms. McCoy's description is exactly why the amendment includes July, a fiscal year forward, because the GRT revenues are already spoken for. And it also gives time to plan. And it also recognizes that we are in a strange COVID budget year still. And things are likely to change. Even, all the best plans are sometimes no good anymore. So it gives time to have this budget settle down, kind of know what we're dealing with. And hopefully by July 1st of next year, we can have a little more planning time, have a little more information about how things are done, and then have an idea about maybe how much money is potentially forecasted from short-term rentals to be available.
Okay, so it wasn't your intent for it to start right away. It was
No.
to start the fiscal year. Okay.
Right. No, it wasn't.
Yeah, my apologies, Chairman. I forgot about the clause that we have there. Thanks.
Okay, great. Councilwoman Villarreal, anything else?
That's all. I just wanted to see procedurally how it would work and if it would depend on, obviously, gross receipts tax and how many people are renting short-term rentals in our economy. I mean, a lot of factors will play into it, but I do think it would be helpful to designate a funding stream that would go towards our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first I want to start by saying when I ran for city council, I campaigned on finding a funding stream for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I think it's something that we need to do. I have heard in my research and advocacy for working on this that we need somewhere $1 to $2 million of kind of consistent revenue, steady stream, and that would help us plan how we use those funds and give us something that we could count on. I don't think this amendment, well, let me, one more thing. I also think that short-term rentals, I completely agree with this, with the advocate for this amendment, that short-term rentals have had an impact on our affordable housing and our ability to have long-term rental stock. And that's part of the reason why I think we have been working on this bill. So we've been working on it. I have been very motivated to work on this bill because of the impact, the negative impact short-term rentals have had on the neighborhoods, particularly in districts 1 and 2. I also realized, to an earlier comment, that they do play a role in our hotel accommodations, the mix that we have, that there are people who want to stay in short-term rentals and not in motels or hotels. And so I think as we have worked on this bill over the last 6 months or more, we have been cognizant of trying to strike a balance, right? Of doing things that don't kill the industry. There are provisions that we have turned down that many have advocated we should do. One of which I will mention is to not allow short-term rentals unless it's your primary residence. That would have the effect of killing the short-term rental industry. And we have chosen not to put that in our bill because we recognize that short-term rentals do play a role in our lodging mix here in Santa Fe, and that we are heavily reliant on tourism as part of our economy. So with those two things said, I don't think, though, that this is the right source of money for funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And there are a number of reasons for that. I think the biggest one is that GRT, as we've seen, because of the pandemic and the hit to our budget, GRT is the major source of revenue for our budget. And we are facing, I believe, a $70 million shortfall that we have had to patch together a budget to do the things that we need to do for the city. So it's bad fiscal policy to tie up that revenue source by dedicating it. It's something you don't want to do as a general rule. We want to have flexibility in our GRT funds. They go into our general fund, and through the budgeting process, we decide how we want to prioritize the use of that money depending on our needs, depending on what issues are facing the city. So we want to have that flexibility. I would argue that now, if we want some of that GRT in a budget year to go to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, that we do that through the budget process and not tie up, again, those funds by putting it in our statute, in our codes, that says by law, we are required to. We tie our hands. And as a finance committee, that's bad fiscal policy. We shouldn't be doing that. I would also argue, it's been said that we need a reliable source. I would argue GRT is not a reliable source of money. It fluctuates, and we've seen that this year. And part of the reason we're in such a trouble is that we've taken a major hit in our GRT. We've fallen off a cliff. We don't have a lot of, we don't have diverse funding revenue sources for the city. GRT is our main source of funding, and it's not reliable. It fluctuates. I think it would be great to find, it would be really great if we could find a new revenue source that was stable and that provided the level of money that we need to make something of our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. This, I've been told that one, we don't, as I think has been previously stated, we don't, so when we get the gross receipts tax from the state, it's not separated out into a nice, pie chart of, all right, you earn this through short-term rentals, and you earn this through sales tax, and you in retail, and you earn this through services. They don't break it out like that. They just give you a lump sum. So that's the other problem, is that I think it creates a real problem with trying to figure out how much money is coming just from short-term rentals so that we put it in there. But then I've also been told that it's not a lot of money. And so, yeah, okay, politically, we could take that money and feel good like we've done something, but it won't be the level at which we need. And I think we really should take the time and find a new revenue source that is stable, that does bring us the level of money we need to do the things we want to do with that affordable housing trust fund. It would also be nice if that revenue source would grow over time. And I don't think, short-term rentals, we are trying, because of the negative impact they've had on neighborhoods, we actually are trying to contain them a little bit, not get rid of them, but contain them. So that's not a revenue source that's going to grow over time. So let's see. And I guess, and just back to the point, one other point, and then I'll give up the floor to other folks. But, the fact that we can't pull it out easily from the money that we get from the state makes it difficult to administer. And so because of that, I don't think that this is the path we want to take. And I don't think as a finance committee, we want to be recommending this for all of these reasons. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to say, along with Councilor Romero Worth, the importance of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund cannot be understated, and that it really is incumbent upon us of finding revenue streams to fund this. I would like to hear more, and I believe Ms. McCoy might be the individual to give me some more information about some of the challenges that have been alluded to regarding how the state delivers GRT to us, how it is delineated, and what our possibilities potentially are there.
Mr. Chair, councilors, we did confirm with TRD that they do not have a report for short-term rentals. Their reporting that is provided to all local governments is based on the NAIC codes. So it would be very difficult to, according to our TRD contacts, to isolate the short-term rentals based on their code. So I concur with Councilor Romero Worth. The administration of this, as our City Attorney McSherry said, would have to be based on an estimate. And the estimate is not currently included, or how to calculate that estimate. We have not currently undergone that analysis. So at this time, we do not have an estimate of what that amount would be based on current revenue to the city from GRT on an annual basis.
Thank you, Ms. McCoy. I appreciate hearing a little bit more about that and what that could potentially look like. I think one of the things that I find, just as we're talking about this topic, another piece that makes me a little bit worried about this funding stream is that oftentimes, if a short-term rental GRT is going to be decreasing, we're going to be seeing a hit to our tourism economy, which is going to be increasing the need for affordable housing. So that's something that I would like to look for some balances for. I think one of the pieces I'm thinking about with this is we're not going to have one funding stream. I don't think we should have one funding stream for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I think that we need to be looking at a number of different streams that can potentially balance out when one stream is lower than another. And so that's another piece that, I think that we want to look at, and I'm almost curious if pulling the funding streams out into different ordinances as opposed to looking at it as a whole and pulling what different parts are going to pull into it in terms of revenue, if that is the approach that we want to be looking at. Sorry, I did have one more question that I am now not recalling, I will have you move on while I recall it, and then I will let you know when it has returned to my head. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. I think this question is for Ms. McSherry. I'm looking at the proposed amendment, and on number 4, where it talks about section 4, it says revenue from the 1.5% municipal gross receipts tax will be used for the purposes listed below. Okay, so we got 1.5% that we're talking about, but then we go, the 1.5% gets used up by item D. So wouldn't item E, which is what we're actually talking about, need to be a separate item?
Chairman Abeyta, Councillor Lindell, I think what we did is there's a couple unrestricted sections. So there's part B, which goes to the general fund. And then we added a clause that says except as limited in paragraph E. And then there's paragraph D, which also is unrestricted, that goes to the general fund. And we added a clause there that also says except as limited in paragraph E. Because you're right, without those clauses, the paragraphs A through D would have accounted for the full 1.5%. So now E takes a portion from B and D of an unknown amount, but definitely a sub part of those two categories, and dedicates them to the affordable trust housing.
Okay, so thanks. So that brings one more question for me. Are we talking, I'm sorry, I'm just not clear on this. Are we talking about the entire amount of municipal gross receipts tax generated from short-term rental? Or are we talking about only the amount that would fall within the 1.5% of municipal gross receipts tax?
Chairman Abeyta, Councilor Lindell, I would say it's potentially even further limited to those quarter percentages that are described in B and D. So it would be a portion of those percentages. So a portion of the 6th 1/4 of gross receipts tax, and a portion of the 3rd and 4th 1/4. So it would be a portion of 3 1/4 percentages.
But we don't know how that's gonna, I mean, what portion of that 3/4% that we're talking about? How is that, how do we know how much that is of that 3/4? I just think that this probably needs a little bit more work to have clarity as to what it is, because I don't know how much. I mean, I'm not asking for an actual dollar amount. I'm asking what's the percentage that we're talking about here, and how does it go up? How does it go down?
Chairman
I don't
Abeyta,
expect it. I don't necessarily.
it would just be directly related to whatever our estimate for short-term rentals is, but you're right. But what factors would go into that estimate have not been determined.
So we aren't really, Ms. McCoy, can you comment on this?
Mr. Chair, Councillor, I concur with our city attorney that the calculation for the estimate, just want to make that clear that this would always be an estimate. It would not be a direct amount that we are receiving confirmation that has been paid, a direct amount of GRT that has been paid by the short-term rental industry in any given period, in any given month. So that being said, the estimate that has not been calculated, or the allocation of that has not been determined. And importantly, those B and D are both now going into the general fund. So those are for general municipal purposes, which are allocated to As you may recall from our conversation back in July, general fund purposes such as salaries and benefits for our employees, police and fire, other city operations.
Well, I'm not unlike other counselors in that I certainly would like to find a way to generate money into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I think everybody would, but the way this stands right now, I'm not exactly sure what I would be supporting if I supported this. So those are just my comments, and I think that it needs a little clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez, did you remember your other question or thought regarding this? And then I'll go to Councilwoman Vihil Coppler for the last word on this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, this was actually, that was part of my question, was the percentage breakdown. Yeah, I think that I would agree that there are some aspects of this that I'm not entirely sure what this means. I know that our previous, there was this report that said that we are leaving about $3 million on the table. That was done in 2018. Do we have confirmation? Is that still accurate? How much money we are leaving on the table? How much money do we really estimate that we are getting GRT short-term rentals? Do we have that from previous years at this time? Or have we just never even done that?
Ms. McCoy.
Mr. Chair, Councillor, that number has not been confirmed by the city. I think that was an independent report. And the idea was the short-term rentals needed to start reporting not just and paying not just lodgers tax to the city, but the GRT as well to the state, so that it could be our share, the city share could be remitted back to the city. And so to be able to, again, because we don't receive the detailed information on the short-term rental industry, there's no way to confirm if that share, if our revenue from GRT is increasing, what share of that increase is due to that particular industry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that there's some pieces of clarity that I would like to get more information on, and I really appreciate Councillor Vihil Coppler being here and being able to hear some of those pieces so that she can be looking at that and help us determine those as we continue to consider this amendment throughout the process. So thank you very much.
Okay, Councilwoman Vihil Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I will have to say that I don't believe the city's doing enough for affordable housing. We get comments like that all the time in the newspaper, in letters, to our faces, everywhere. And here's an opportunity to do something. It's not going to solve all the problems that everybody has raised tonight, but it is true. It is one stream. And I don't believe we're ever going to find one total 100% stream of funding for affordable housing. We have to take bits and pieces from nooks and crannies and put some money toward the fund. This would only be one stream. And it is written rather loosely. We felt like we wouldn't be able to put a number or necessarily a percentage. Maybe a percentage is more fair, but we would have to do estimates on a yearly basis, probably through budget preparation and the data, the revenue that we have. That's why it's open-ended. But somewhere, somebody figured out in this municipal tax ordinance that they could figure out how much would go to transit, to libraries, to parks, and all of that. I'm sure we could figure the thing out. And I don't, as you can see from how it's written, the affordable housing monies that would come in from short-term rentals wouldn't be asking for the whole piece of the pie. It would be a portion of it. And again, that's what would be estimated. And we do that with the Lodgers Tax Fund. So in this case, if this is approved, it's housing to housing, short-term rental housing to affordable housing. They're like-minded, like-spirited events. When we set this up with Lodgers Tax years and years ago, the Lodgers Tax goes to tourism, and tourism projects or related fields or ideas. And that's very strict. The information I have was that the GRT estimate report was done by HomeWise, and they estimated in 2018 that the income from Santa Fe City's short-term rental is between $1.5 and $2 million. So, you know, that is not something that this particular amendment would take all and leave nothing for anything else, but it is one revenue stream, and we rarely get a chance to, again, make any impact or dent in affordable housing. And it's not this amendment's not going to solve it, but it's going to do something for the program. And the thing I like about it is that it recognizes some of the public comment we had about spending time on short-term rentals versus affordable housing. And I mentioned earlier, if we closed up all short-term rentals, those houses and such would never be in the short-term rental housing program because it's just unmarketable like that. That's just not the way it works. So, but this is an opportunity to use like funds for like funds. And this was brought up by the Mayor's Housing Coalition Task Force. This is a recommendation from them. They've spent many times studying all of the issues related to housing, and this is one. And it's not, again, a perfect ends all to be all, but it's something. And we rarely have the time, we rarely have the pleasure of finding a revenue source. No one here who says we'd rather have another revenue source has identified where that would come from. But there's something before you today, something that can make a dent in it. And if we don't like it down the road, then we change it. But here's something that we have an opportunity to do. And we have an opportunity to put our money where our mouth is. We can't just be saying we're for affordable housing and do nothing about it. Now, Alexander Ladd is doing wonderful things with it, but it's not enough. It's barely making a dent. And so here's an opportunity, and I would urge this committee to support this. It's not rocket science to figure out how much money we would get. There's codes already in place in the New Mexico code for this revenue. We just need to parcel it out a bit more. And even we could maybe get that from records that the Planning and Land Use Office should have, because they know how many short-term rentals we have. You know, we could do a quick study on getting an idea about revenue and gross receipts. And in fact, maybe that's not a bad idea, because then we'd know that people are really paying into gross receipts what they should be paying. That wouldn't be our purpose, but at least my point is it would give us an idea of what monies we're looking at. So I would urge you to think about this again, because again, we have a rare opportunity to really put the money where our mouth is. And that is that we are a council who supports affordable housing. And we're not going to let this opportunity slip away. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councilwoman Johann Viel-Koppler. We have a motion. We have amendments. Does the committee want to consider an amendment to the amendment or an amendment to the motion that is on the table right now?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilwoman Villarreal.
why didn't we do this cleanly like we do for our council meetings, where we do each individual amendment by itself, voting on each of the amendments? I don't understand why we're not doing it that way instead of trying to fold them into what the motion is currently on the table.
We
Well,
can
I
do.
think what I heard early on was that we needed to offer an amendment to the motion that is currently on the table. So if you want to offer an amendment now to include one or both of these amendments that we heard, I think you can do that.
Well, the way I see it is that doing them individually, like the package from the sponsors, voting on that, and then actually voting on the other amendments so that we can move on and do them separately, not folded in as an amendment to the existing motion. Sorry, not amendment, but I don't
Yeah,
understand.
I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and vote on the I guess because Mr. McSherry said, I think since we're a committee, we can do things. We don't have to be as strict as the governing body. Let's act on this motion that's in front of us that has the original sponsor amendments. Then if someone wants to, what would we do? Make another motion to consider another one, or?
Mr. Chair?
I think we've got to do it the way
Yep.
it was explained, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there's a motion on the floor. If a member of the committee wants to take action on either of these amendments provided by non-committee members, they have that ability. So Councillor Villarreal, if you would like to make a motion to add one or both of these amendments to the bill with the sponsors' amendments, you can do that.
I don't understand why we're doing them all together instead of having a motion to look at the first amendment and then the other two amendments separately.
Well,
not to approve the overall STR ordinance, because that I want to do, and I think that the amendments should be separate like we normally do. So I don't understand how to vote or make. I don't understand what we need here.
Mr. Chair, Councillor.
Yes.
You
Councilwoman
can
Romero
do
would-
that. You are one of the sponsors on the amendment that has been put forward with the motion to adopt the bill with the sponsors amendment. So that's on the floor. We can vote that up or down and move on to the next item on our agenda. Or if there's a councillor who wants to make a motion to add one or both of these amendments made by non-committee members, you can do that. We're not precluding you from doing that. So
I know that, but I'm saying the process is not making sense to me. We usually do them individually.
wait, Mr. Chair, Councillor, that's actually, sometimes we make a motion with an amendment we want, and then if people want to further amend it, that's possible.
Right, because the problem is if you act on the ordinance with an amendment, then it's done.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so it can't be done how do you, if we're interested in, let's say, the GRT amendment, if it's already done, we won't have an opportunity to bring that up or vote on that. Is that right?
That's
Aaron,
what I'm saying.
Mr. Chair, since I don't regularly attend all the finance committee meetings, so I don't know what your general practices are, but if we're following the procedures we follow in council, then yes, that's correct, what you just described.
Okay, so does someone want to amend the existing motion to include Councilwoman Vihil Coppler's amendment?
I move to include the GRT amendment to the existing motion.
Okay, is there a second?
How else to say that, but
Is there a second? Okay, so that dies for the lack of a second. Is there a motion to amend the motion to include?
questions if you don't know what's going on.
What was that, Councilwoman Villarreal? Did someone second it? Nobody seconded your motion.
No, I know that, but we have a question here that someone in our council's not asking.
Is there a question from a committee member regarding?
I have a question as we amend and how things then move to, if we amend things here, does it move to governing body as an entire package from us, or we still consider all the amendments at governing body as a separate component, and we are just recommending the amendments from, okay,
This will just be the
Thank
action
you.
of the finance committee, right?
thank you. Right, thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Does someone want to offer an amendment to include Councillor Garcia's proposed amendment? Okay, so we are back to the original motion with the amendments as proposed by the Councilwoman Romero Worth originally.
The sponsors, Mr. Chair.
And with the sponsors, yes. Can I have a roll call, please, on that?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes, and I'd like an opportunity to explain my vote.
okay. Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes, and I'd like to explain my vote.
okay. Councillor Sig Lindell,
Yes,
and Councillor Roman Abeyta.
Yes, and I'll explain my vote also. So let's start with, so the motion passes. Let's start with Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that with the GRT amendment, I just was not ready to, I did not feel ready to vote on this based on wanting to see a little bit more of how this would actually be processed in the city. And so between now and when we do take a final vote on that, I would be really interested in hearing more about that process. So I believe that might be a request for Ms. McCoy or perhaps for Councillor Vihel-Coppler. Thank you.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's ways to dissect this a little bit better, the GRT amendment, so that everybody understands the possibilities and maybe even ways to like restructure it. So I can work, I'd like to work with Councilwoman Vihel-Coppler on that, and also with some of our staff to understand that better, because I think there may be some possibilities that we're not considering. So I want to just put that out there. And I would also invite Councillor Garcia to continue on in the next committee that he's part of to bring up an amendment, and so it can be considered, at least voted on, so that people know where we stand on that. And that's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. McCoy, I would like to have you report back to the Finance Committee an estimate of what you think this ordinance and proposed amendment would generate as far as new revenue, and maybe, you know, I don't know if I'm in favor of designating it, but it would be good to have an amount, and maybe an amendment to that amendment is that we find some kind of funding source equal to that amount, so that we're not tying up the actual GRT, because as we put our budget together, we want that flexibility. But I think we do have to start somewhere. I think we do need to make a commitment to the Affordable Housing Fund. And I understand Councilwoman Vihel-Coppler's amendment, because it does that. And so I'd be interested in the estimate at our next Finance Committee meeting. And this is something that I would like to continue to discuss at Finance Committee, maybe not this specific GRT, but the Affordable Housing Fund in general. I think we need to start having a discussion about that again and talk about how we could fund it. And I think a start is this GRT or an estimate that's equal to it. So thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, councilors, we'd be happy to put that information together. We think that's a key piece to moving forward with this amendment.
Okay, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
I just add that this isn't new revenue. This is revenue that we already put in our general fund and that we already allocate through the budget process towards our priorities in any one given budget cycle. So I would agree. I would love to find new revenue that we can put towards the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but this is not new revenue. We're taking money from the general fund, which we, as we have heard, is already fully allocated for this year. So we would be having to take it away from somewhere else to put it here. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, like I said, I think this committee needs to continue to discuss this issue. Okay, thank you to Councilwoman Vihil Coppler and Councilor Garcia for joining us on this issue. We appreciate it. Okay, that brings us to item B, which is a request for approval of the 2019-2020 CAPR to be submitted to HUD. Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I simply wanted to pull this because I found the charts to not be very intuitive to read. And so I was just hoping to have Ms. Ladd walk through those for anybody else who was looking at this. I had the opportunity to speak with her about it today, but it is because of how HUD has us report things, the way that it's reported is not very intuitive. And so I was hoping that Ms. Ladd would be able to walk through the charts on page, I believe it's 5 of our packet is where it begins. And I don't know if it'd be possible to, if somebody's able to share a screen and pull that up on the screen, that might be helpful. But if not, we could just go through the headers.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Chair, I think I can share my screen. Would you like to look at it? The only problem is it's sideways on my screen.
Are you in PrimeGov?
No, I was not able to get into PrimeGov for some reason. So I'm just looking at it from the city's website where we have it posted. So what I can do, maybe if I pull up the actual Word doc, let me do that. Is that what you would like to do, though, to see the table on the screen?
I think it could be helpful if it's not a very challenging task to undertake at this moment. There we go, technology.
Isn't it? Okay. Let's see. It looks like, all right. All right, is everybody able to see this big table?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. The way this report is formatted is that it is responding directly to our annual action plan, which we submitted to HUD in the beginning, before the program year began. So this is the 2019-20 program year. So this was over on June 30th of 2020. Every year we write an annual action plan, and it's based on the recommended funding allocations for CDBG funds. It is also all related to a 5-year plan called the consolidated plan that we submit to HUD. And what this table is trying to do, and I say trying to do because it doesn't work very well, is trying to tie what our current accomplishments are through this allocating CDBG funds with what we said we would do in our 5-year strategic plan. So that column that is the expected and actual percent complete, and then the expected for the program year, and the actual and the percent complete. So the columns on the right side that are labeled program year, those are a little easier to explain. So that those numbers are the numbers we thought we would achieve based on our applications for funds under the expected column, and then what we actually achieved. And you can see there's a big crazy, we had a huge accomplishment, an over accomplishment in the area of public services, because when the pandemic hit, so many people were accessing referral and information from the Adelante program. So that's kind of where that like crazy 2,400% accomplishment comes from. The second intention with this table is to tie the funding allocations with the goals that we've set out in our 5-year plan as what we're we're hoping to achieve. All of the columns under the categories and the indicators, I have no choice over any of those. They're a drop-down menu. I have to pick what HUD allows me to pick. And so it can be a little bit clunky and not make a whole lot of sense. I think Councillor Casat-Sanchez was sort of wondering earlier in our conversation, like, well, what's the difference between public facility and public infrastructure? And the difference would be the facility is where somebody would go to access services or an amenity, and the infrastructure is kind of what gets them there. The road, the sidewalk, the steps up to the front door. And both of those things, the most important thing about them is that they're public. They're for anybody to access. And I think, was that about it, Councillor Casat-Sanchez, or did you want to talk a little bit more?
Yeah, that was it. We had a more, I'm sorry, I had a child screaming for a minute, so maybe you did cover this. The discussion of the consolidated versus strategic plan. Did you discuss that while my kid was screaming in my ear?
Yeah. So I probably didn't add enough detail. The consolidated plan, this 5-year plan, one section of the 5-year plan is called the strategic plan. And then every year through this annual action plan, we update what we said we were going to do in the strategic plan. Now, this is crazy. And I've been doing this report for 15 years of my life almost. And there's still, it's not very clear what HUD is aiming for between the expected in the strategic plan and the actual in the strategic plan. So I think because these numbers are preloaded into the system. So that 237, I think what that's saying, so under the actual strategic plan, I think the 237 is based on what we reported for in the last CAPER. So it's trying to keep track for us, which is great, but it can also be a little confusing because there are ways where it can get edited. And so sometimes I have to go back and look and try to remember, like, where did I put that number in, or did the system put it in? HUD never makes anything easy. It'd be so much better if I could just create a Word doc and do all this, but it's not that way. And Councillor Villarreal is shaking her head because she's read almost as many of these plans as I've written.
Okay, thank you so much, Alexandra. I really struggled with this table, so I wanted to make sure that we brought it up and that you had the opportunity to explain it as you did to me this afternoon for anybody else who is watching and was curious. So that was all. Thank you. I move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further
Second.
discussion? Okay, can I have a roll call, please? Ms. McCoy, can someone take a roll call?
I've got it here. Councillor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
and Councillor Jamie Casat-Sanchez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes. We are on to item G, which is a request approval of capital reallocation of the 2018 GRT bond for parks, equipment and machinery and Circle Drive paving. Councilwoman Casat-Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Regina. Thank you so much for joining us. I just had a question. I know that when the initial voting occurred was, I'm sorry, I don't have looks like 2003 when they spoke with the residents of this area. And do we know how many of those residents are still there? Has there been a lot of turnover because they also have a financial component that they're responsible for in this, as I am understanding it here?
Thank you so much for the question, Chairman, Councillor Casat-Sanchez. Actually, we've been in regular communication with residents on a daily basis, and they have all of their money put together and they're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. And I'm assuming that we still have the the percentage of residents that are living on that street that signed the petition that it will still hold?
It was only just completed within the last 6 months. They may have started a long time ago, but
Okay, that's wonderful to know. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That was my only question. I apologize. I did not have the opportunity to reach out ahead of time. I move to approve.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second,
Any further discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councillor Renee Villarreal.
Yes.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Segney Lindell,
yes.
and Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we are on to item I, which is consideration of a resolution relating to a request for approval of the first quarter budget amendments for fiscal year 2020, 2021. Councilman Lindell.
Yeah, I'm just asking for a little explanation on this, considering where we are, what we've faced with our budget, an explanation of, we're looking at, I don't know, 50 some million. If you could just run through that a little bit, Mary, and tell us what we're facing with it and if it's a fiscally prudent thing for us to be doing at this point.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Councillor, thank you for the question. We also have, I'm going to just go over a few opening remarks, and then we have Andy Hopkins from our budget office here as well to dive into the details. What you see presented in front of you today is all of the budget adjustments that have been done within the first quarter. The majority of these fall into the category of the CARES Act funding, so about 13 million for CARES Act funding that was approved by council. In addition to that, what council has not seen until this point in time is the significant reallocation of capital funding and of grant funding. And so that particular amount, council did authorize me as the finance director to carry these funds forward for to continue operations. So for example, if a capital project wanted to continue, we did not have to wait until it got through the 2-week council approval process to continue this. These are allocations of funding that are moving from one fiscal year to the next fiscal year. And so for that purpose, the revenue has already been allocated. A significant portion of these carry forward, either for grants or for capital projects, have already been allocated either in the GRT bond approval process or in a grant approval process in a prior year by the city council. So that being said, I'll turn it over to Andy to dive into more detail about the report, and we stand to answer any questions that the council has.
Mr. Chair, Councillor Lindell, there's really not a whole lot I can add to that. Mary did a very excellent job of explaining what's going on here, and I'm not just saying that because she's my boss. But the one piece that I would add that was another major factor in this is the CARES Act grants that have already been approved by the council. That is probably, next to the capital carry forwards, that is probably the largest piece of what you're seeing. And of course, that is all grant funded through the federal government. So that won't really impact our budget in terms of, already allocated revenues or anything like that. That's additional money coming in from the feds. But the vast majority is covered by that and by reauthorization of capital projects that are ongoing and have already been bonded. The money is already there. It's just, because we have an annual budget process, every year we have to bring those forward into the current year so we can keep those capital projects going.
Thank you very much. Chair, I would make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
and Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to matters from staff. Ms. McCoy.
Mr. Chair, just wanted to give you a brief update on GRT for the month of August. We are just shy of 14% decline year over year for the GRT when you compare August of 2019 GRT revenue to August of 2020 GRT revenue. So staff has put together that memo and that'll be distributed this week. In addition to that, staff has also prepared an economic update and will be preparing an economic update on a monthly basis to present to council as well. So you can look forward to that coming this week. What we are doing is gathering data, month by month data that we have, whether it's unemployment or employment data, data on our airport traffic, data on our hotel occupancies, to be able to share with the council. If there's any information that you would like added to that report, we can look for a regular source for that economic information, but we thought it was important to, since GRT is on a 2-month delay, to be able to provide you with that update on these monthly economic indicators. So that will be coming your way as well. In addition, we have wanted to give you an update on the FY19 audit, or I'm sorry, the FY20 audit. We have hired, we are working on that process. We have hired on a few extra contractors to assist us with the year-end close process. This is extreme. We're running about a 40% vacancy, as we discussed during the budget hearings in the finance department. And this has been an extremely, that combined with the furloughs has been an extremely difficult year-end close process for us. So we are still continuing diligently to work through those challenges. In addition, as you were notified via email from the city manager recently, within the last month, Tyler Systems, which runs our financial, HR, and land use permitting and business license permitting systems, there was a security breach at Tyler. Tyler has notified the city that we were not impacted, but for about 4 weeks, we were not able to receive technical assistance from Tyler. And so that has put us a few weeks behind schedule as well, since we were not able to rely on Tyler for technical assistance in closing the fiscal year. So I'll continue to provide these reports as we move forward, as we're closing fiscal year 20. We are having weekly updates with the mayor and the city manager on the progress that the finance team as well as city departments are having in terms of correcting the issues that were raised in the FY19 audit and the progress for the FY20 year-end close. In addition, we are having weekly meetings with our external auditors, CLA, Clifton Larson Allen, to keep them updated on the progress. So as different pieces of the year-end close are done, we are turning those pieces over to our external auditors so they can commence their work on FY20. So those were the updates that I have at this time as far as our major processes that we are undergoing. In addition, we are hoping to get started in the next few months. We're currently working on FY22 revenue projections, and we are hoping to get started on the official budget process with our department directors for FY22. I know it seems like we just closed FY21 budget with an official vote in July, so it's very quick turnaround for us to start working on FY22. But we want to allow plenty of time to plan. Just as a reminder, we did 3 different budgets for FY21 since January of last year through July, through the budget that you voted on in July. So in anticipation of continued economic uncertainty and revenue uncertainty for the city, we're planning on getting that started in December, that whole process, to be able to plan for any adjustments as the monthly economic and GRT revenue comes our way. So that's an update from our staff at this point.
Great. Matters from the committee. Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to put in a plug. The Quality of Life Committee is meeting on Wednesday. And we are kicking off with a couple of presentations that will help us to understand the housing situation, affordable housing situation, and homelessness issues in our city. This will be the first of what I would consider a 4 to 5 month deep dive into our housing issues. And I just want to let everybody know that we are doing things as a city. We'll be hearing about that. The need is incredible and probably growing. And there are more things we can do. And just want folks to know that we are starting to pay some serious attention to the policy objectives that we can bring to bear on a really important issue. So just wanted to give that plug. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and on that note, Ms. McCoy, can we kind of follow a parallel track as a finance committee and focus on the financial part of that? Like, for example, I would like a presentation from the Affordable Housing Trust regarding the fund, maybe as a starting place, something real brief. Because I hear different amounts, like we should be putting 1 million in every year. No, we should be putting 3. Realistically, though, this is what we should be spending or can spend. So I would like to get an overview from the fund so that I could refamiliarize myself with it. And then if you can also start working on the estimates that I asked for earlier about the short-term rental. And then if you can think, and maybe as we go on this parallel track, if we can think of other potential sources of either existing revenue or new revenue that we can put towards this affordable housing initiative, I'd like to start exploring that again from a financial perspective. So thank you, Councilwoman Romero Worth, for bringing that up. And hopefully, like I said, as a finance committee, we can kind of follow that same path.
I think that's an excellent idea. Thank you, Chair.
We'd be
Okay.
happy to put that together. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so anything else from the committee? Our next meeting is November 30th. So thank you and have a good evening.
See you guys later.